friends, this is Marilyn from tarotclarity.com, and I apologize for the long break between videos. You know how sometimes just life gets in the way, and it hasn't been bad. This time it's been really good. No health issues. It's just that we've had a couple projects and developments in our life which are really fun, and one of them being that we have decided to redecorate our master bedroom, which we never got around to. We've been living in this house now going on 2 years. In December it'll be 2 years, and our bedroom just looks like a hodgepodge of furniture from when, you know how it is when you're in your 30s or your 20s and you finally get your first apartment or your first house, and you don't really have the money to buy furniture, so you take a little bit from this parent, a little bit from that cousin, and a little bit from this and there, and so you eventually have like this bedroom that's like a nightmare, right? And both of us are like that because we're both divorced. We came to each other without really proper bedroom furniture, and we just each have a piece of this, a piece of that, and we put it together and none of it matches. So we've just been living with it. And, when we went out to California a few weeks ago, I mentioned that we went out there, and, I was motivated by their beautiful home. Now, my home is no less beautiful. I don't mean to sound like my house isn't as pretty and keeping up with the Joneses, but it was motivation, because I was stagnating. I knew we had to fix our bedroom, and I didn't see the way. I just didn't see the way. I just didn't know what to do. I just was stuck, And seeing another house that the person, was motivated and got their stuff, and they lived there 5 months and everything was perfect. We've been here 2 years and we're still trying to figure it out. But it was just the impetus I needed, that we both needed, to get things going. And I will mention the nature of the project because in a way it ties in to this film that I'm about to do the video on. And for those of you who like my videos on film, I think you're really going to love this one. This one's really good. For those of you who are on the fence or you don't think you're going to like it, give this one a chance, because these film videos that I do with tarot, at the end I ask questions about the plot holes that weren't answered. So give it a chance, because they're a lot of fun, and they're a lot of fun for me to do. But at any rate, at this period of the year, this time of year, the veil is thin, right? And we see it everywhere, and we're reminded everywhere by some, Samhain and Halloween, and we can feel it in our bones that the veil is thin. And I think the impetus for my bedroom has to do with a connection to my father. My father passed away, and my mother wanted to get rid of his bureau. She couldn't bear to put it on the curb, because it's a significant piece of mid-century furniture. 3 or 4 men can barely lift this thing up. It's solid oak, and it's the kind of thing that you need straps around your waist, and you need a dolly to pull it, and it's just significant. And aside from that it's a significant piece. It's got nice design, it's got nice style, but it's like almost 70 years old, and it needs to be refinished. And I don't know how to refinish furniture, but I'm going to learn. But I've had this massive piece of furniture, and it was kind of the thing that was stopping me from progressing in that bedroom, because I didn't feel like it was my style, but I was stuck with it, and I knew not to paint it because it was beautiful solid wood. But yeah, I was kind of stuck with it, and I didn't want to let go of it, and I didn't want to live with it. So it was one of those kind of deals, and I think that was my stagnation, right? So I don't know if it's because the veil is thin, or what happened, because the people we visited in California definitely don't have the mid-century vibe going on. Their house is not mid-century vibe. It's something else altogether. But when I came back and I was thinking, we got to do something about this bedroom, and I was just looking at that piece of furniture, I thought I had the answer, like suddenly. And maybe because the veil is thin, it was like my father's voice saying, "Girl, what the heck is wrong with you? You have this incredible piece of mid-century furniture in front of you. Figure it out and do something with it." And I heard that voice loud and clear, and that's what I decided to do. So from being a piece of furniture that I kind of hated and just kind of felt like I was stuck with, I decided to embrace it. And now I'm centering, it's the centerpiece of the entire redecorating of my room, our bedroom. And I've been going on Facebook Marketplace for other pieces that aren't, so it's not matchy. I can't get the exact set, and I wouldn't want the exact set. I want to keep it fresh, and I don't really want to, I want to have to refinish as few pieces as possible. So I'm trying to buy pieces that have already been refinished, by somebody else. And it's really coming along great. And who would have thunk it? I never would have thought that piece of furniture from my father would be the showcase of the bedroom. Never would have thought. To me, it was always the bane of my existence. So it just goes to show you, sometimes you got to look at things at a new light. And I don't know why I went off on the tangent, except for the fact that in a way it kind of connects to this film, because this film is a movie that is about when the veil is thin, in a way. The film is called Between Two Worlds. It was created in 1944 and directed by Edward A. Blatt. Now, it was based on a 1923 play called Outward Bound, which was then created into a movie in 1930, also called Outward Bound. I think that film starred Leslie Howard, and I'm reasonably sure I saw it and didn't like it. I do remember it, but I didn't really kind of like it that much. It was okay, but I wasn't in love with it. There was a plot feature in that film, in that rendition, 1930, Outward Bound, that I thought was a little bit better handled than here. But overall, I thought this was the more superior film. Now, it could have been because we had really great actors in this film. Now, not to say that Leslie Howard wasn't a great actor, but when I start naming some of these actors' names in this film from 1944, you'll see what I'm saying. First and foremost, John Garfield. Now, if any of you have ever seen John Garfield or you know who he is, you know he was a great actor. His character name is Tommy. He has a love interest named Maxine, and the actress who plays her is Faye Emerson. Faye Emerson did a number of noir films. If you ever watch Eddie Mueller, you'll sometimes see her in some of those noir films. This is probably the best film she was ever in. And as a little bit of trivia, she was married at one point to one of FDR's sons. Paul Henried was in this film. His name is Henry. He was a concert pianist. His wife in this film was Eleanor Parker. Her name was Anne. The great Sidney Greenstreet. He was so great. He was in this film as the examiner. Edmund Gwynn was in this film. You've seen him. He was a character actor on the elderly side. Short. You've seen him in a million things if you're an old film fanatic like I am. I think he was in the sci-fi film Them. If you're familiar with like that was a fun movie. He was in that. And I think he was also like Santa Claus in 42nd Street or something like that. It might have been him. George Tobias was another character actor. We saw him in a lot of things. Sarah Allgood, I think she was Irish. We saw her in a lot of things too. She was always like the saintly mother kind of thing, the saintly woman. And I think I've mentioned most of the characters, at least the character actors that I was familiar with. Now, this one's going to be a long one. So I'm going to, this is, of all the movie film videos that I've done, this is going to be a long one. For those of you who love my movie videos, you're going to love this one because I actually have like 7 questions at the end. So I have a lot of questions, which means there's going to be a lot of demonstration tarot readings at the end, right? But because it's going to be a long one, it may turn off some of the people who don't particularly tune into my movie video demonstration reads. But I would encourage you to hang in there with this one because this movie was so good, and I think you'll be surprised. Just give this one a chance. If you didn't give any of my other movie videos a chance, give this one a chance. So let me get started. The film begins, we understand that it's 1944. They're in an English port. England is clearly at war. There's a ship going to America, and the seafarers want to get out of Europe, so they're looking to go to the United States. The seafarers, since it was a time of war, are told not to ask questions, and because just in case there's any like German spies or anything like that on the ship, don't ask questions. We're not giving you any information. Just suffice it to say that you're going where you need to go, you're going where you expect to go, and shut up about it. It was pretty much like that. There was the last bunch of travelers who were trying to get out, and they're just trying to get on that last ship. Straight away, we realize with this last bunch of people who are trying to get out that there's a class distinction between them. There's poor people, and lower classes mixed in with the higher echelon of society. And, some of the higher echelon of society individuals are really snobbish and like they don't want to sit next to the poor common folk, because they may have bugs or something like that. So right away we see that there's a class distinction between travelers on this particular ship. One traveler is desperate to get on the ship, but he doesn't have the proper papers. He's a concert pianist, we understand, and he's offered to travel as a hired hand to work his passage. Now, he tells the guy, I have a wife, but she doesn't have to leave like I do. I have to leave. She can stay here. It won't be a problem for her to stay here, but it's a problem for me to stay here. So we have that little bit of information, but that's it. That's the only time it's ever spoken. He's denied, he's told, look, you don't have your proper papers and stuff like that. Doesn't matter what you're willing to do to sail for free. You're just not getting on the ship. So there's an air raid alarm that goes off, which alerts all the travelers to take cover. So it's being actively bombed while all of this is happening. That last group of travelers got themselves into a cab, and the cab is hurriedly taking them to their ship. And there is an explosion just exactly when they pass by the camera. Now, the pianist's wife, in the meanwhile, has been on a wild goose chase looking for her husband because she can't find where he went. And she goes to the port, looking for him at the port, thinking that maybe he was looking to leave. And as he's at the port, she sees the bomb go off right behind, or right bullseye on the cab filled with the travelers for the last travelers, that were looking to get on a ship. So she was at the port long enough to see the individual characters. She was at the port long enough to see them get into the cab. And she was in the vicinity long enough to see, or to suspect, or to believe that when the cab drove off, the cab was a direct hit for the bomb. As a viewer of the film, when you see it, when I saw it, every time I see it, I think, Did it hit the cab, or was it behind the cab? So it's kind of ambiguous from our perspective, from my perspective, I thought, because I thought maybe there was a chance they got away. But it kind of looked like it was a dead hit. And the pianist's wife, her perspective is that it was a dead hit. So she witnesses this cab getting hit. She can't find her husband, so she goes home. She goes home to look for her husband. And when she arrives home, he's already been there. And before she got there, he turned on the gas, the gas fireplace or whatever to kill himself and to end his life. And he put, towels under the windows or whatever somebody does that wants to do that. And when she finally gets home, she gets in the apartment. She doesn't smell the gas, which would have been the first thing that you would have been able to tell. She doesn't realize that he's done that. But she finds him, and she was like, "Oh, I've looked all over for you." And they embrace and they hug and kiss, and he's like saying, "I'm no good for you. My hands are worthless," or I'm no good for you. You deserve better. That kind of stuff. And she's looking, and they're hugging and they're kissing, and she's like, "Don't be ridiculous. I love you." It was really sappy, right? And as she's looking around the room, though, she's starting to notice that there's the telltale signs that somebody's trying to gas themselves, because she sees the towels under the windows, and maybe she smells the gas, and then she realizes what he's done. And instead of him saying, "Girl," or instead of him realizing that she's back now and saying, "I got to stop this because I don't want my wife to die with me," that would have, for me, been the first thing I would have done, was like turn off the gas and open the windows, because I wouldn't want my loved one to die. But he doesn't do that. He doesn't do that. And then when she realizes what he's done, instead of bitch slapping him and cracking open a window to say, "What the heck is wrong with you?" she doesn't do that either. Instead, they just like embrace, and they just tell each other how much they love each other, and whatever happens, they're going together. So it's really sappy kind of stuff, but that's what they decide to do. So they decide whatever happens as a result of this gassing that he's done, they're going to go together. But the next thing they both realize is that they're on a ship. And they observe that they're on the ship with the same travelers that were the last group of travelers to get on a boat, the ones that were in the cab. So the wife has that unique perspective that the husband doesn't have. He remembers seeing those travelers, but he didn't see the cab explode like she did. And she realizes one by one, as she sees these characters, that they were all in that last cab that went to get on the ship. Now, initially they're a little confused because, he knew he was denied passage when he was at the port. And so he's kind of trying to understand, how did I end up on a ship? They denied my passage. And then she says, "I know who these passengers were. They got into a cab that was bombed." And I think she's the first to realize, "Henry, we're dead. We're dead," right? And they're dead, and so are we. So the husband then begins to remember, that they died in the apartment because of what he did. And so then the two of them now understand what happened, and they're aware of the fact. I'm only on page 3 of my notes. It's like 20 pages, and we're already at minute 18. So this one's probably going to be at least an hour, if not 2. So I may or may not decide to break it into 2 pieces. So we'll see. So at any rate, they wander around the ship, the husband and the wife, and he finds a piano, and he begins to miraculously play on it. So then we understand from the dialogue that comes now that there was something wrong with his hands, and he wasn't able to play the piano. Like, the only thing he was good for was to be a concert pianist. And because his hands were damaged and he couldn't be a concert pianist, he was worthless. But it doesn't answer the question why he wanted to get on the ship and leave his wife behind, because his problems would be solved if he was in America but that she wouldn't have a problem if she was left behind. It wouldn't be so. I think that there was something more than just that his hands were no good. I think I wonder if there was an undertone of his, maybe he was Jewish, and he couldn't stay there because otherwise. But the film doesn't say that. The film doesn't say that. But leaving your wife in another country because your fingers don't play the piano very good doesn't sound like a really good reason to abandon your wife and say she'll be fine, right? Unless he's Jewish and he has to leave and she'll be fine because she's not Jewish, right? But, so that's a little bit of a question that's never answered. But he discovers that now he can play the piano wonderfully, and so he's in heaven playing the piano. They are together, and that's all they care about. No matter what happens, they are together, and they keep saying that over and over and over again. And he can play the piano, and they're just like, life is good. At this point, the camera lets us meet all the other travelers. And for a big ship, there's only about 10 travelers, or 8 to 10 travelers. So there's not a lot of people on this huge ship, which is another thing that they don't like. Like, why would there be the expense of going across the ocean for 10 people? Who does that, But it's just the magic of film. We learn that there is a reverend who is a good man, she's not a peasant woman, but she's a woman from the lower classes. There's a steward, or sometimes he does double duty as a bartender. There's a very wealthy couple who are prone to bickering. There's an unmarried couple traveling together. He's a journalist, and she's an actress. Now, this is the John Garfield and the Faye Emerson characters. They're both washed up. They're Americans going home after not making a success of themselves abroad. So he was a journalist who got into some trouble, some kind of disgrace, and now he's got to come home because he's coming home with his tail between his legs. She was an actress who thought she was going to, steal, be a sensation on either the big stage or in the films over in England, but she didn't make anything of herself, so she's coming home too. There's a rich, pompous guy who barks orders around everybody. We discover that he was some kind of war profiteer. He was a despicable individual. He didn't just create things that could benefit our veterans. He only was interested in benefiting from war. So he was almost like somebody who instigated war or something like that, just to benefit from it. And he's generally annoyed that such an important man as himself would have to travel with these low-life people. We discover that the journalist did an expose on this guy. This guy's name was Langley, okay? And the journalist guy's name is Tommy. That was played by John Garfield. So the Garfield character, Tommy, did an expose on this evil man, Langley, and just blew the lid off of who he was. So he did a great job. But Langley had enough money to squelch it. And not only did he suppress the story, but he managed also to have Tommy go down in flames in disgrace. So whatever thing he did to Tommy, finished Tommy. So Tommy was finished, And Tommy, as he's wandering around the ship, starts to suspect that something's off. He's sharp, he's smart. And, things that people are saying and that just doesn't add up. He heard the bartender say something that didn't quite add, and he's like, something's going on this ship. I don't understand what it is, but something's off. His girlfriend joins the warmonger. I don't know the actor's name, but because Tommy and he get into a big argument, because Tommy and Langley get into this big argument and it's ugly. Maxine, even though she's Garfield's girlfriend, she sees an opportunity herself to like be a gold digger. So she sees an opportunity to go over to Langley and hook onto his, what's the word? Hook onto his parade, because Tommy is at the end. He's been disgraced, So now she's like looking at this other guy saying, he's the top of the heap. I'm going to hook up with him. So she's sort of slowly, you see her gravitating toward him. And he's an easy mark because she's a beautiful girl. She's a beautiful woman, and he's just like a miserable guy, But he's an easy target because somebody like him has an ego like this big. He would definitely want a piece of, arm candy as beautiful as her. So she figures it's a shoo-in. I can win him over. While the pianist is playing the piano, some people love it, some people are annoyed by it. One of the people who loves it, I think he was a longshoreman, or he was a sailor, and he was from New York. I think his name was Pete, and he really enjoys the music, and he's hanging out, and we learn a little bit of his story. He says that he's finally rushing home to the States because his wife just had a baby. And, he's just so excited. He can't contain himself. He's so excited. And he's just telling everybody who will listen, I'm a father. I'm going home to see my wife and my baby, So he's really excited. And he tells this to the pianist and his wife. And, of course, the pianist and his wife realize, he doesn't know he's dead, So, they realize he doesn't know he's dead, and they feel terrible because they know the truth. Now, the bartender, for some reason, who is the steward, so the steward is the guy that came with the ship, right? He realizes that the pianist couple, Henry and his wife Anne, he knows that they realize that they are dead, and he tells them to let the others discover the truth for themselves. He came with the ship. So the steward, I think his name was Stubby, says, don't tell them. Don't tell any of them. Let them discover that they're dead on their own. This is a truth they have to come to on their own. And they say, well, why do we know? Why do we know what it is? And Stubby says to them, well, you're different than they are. They didn't know they were dying. They didn't know they were killed. You did. You did it deliberately. You deliberately knew that you were taking your life so that when you died, you knew why. When asked, the steward tells the couple that their destination will be either heaven or hell, and that heaven and hell are pretty much the same place. Now, John Garfield, the journalist, chances upon the poor Irish woman, and they chat up a little bit, and she says she's going to make it her business to see after him and to make sure he's comfortable. He's like, what's the matter with you? Why do you give a hoot about me or, whether I'm comfortable or not? This is kind of weird. And, excuse me, she's old enough to be his mother, so he knows that she's not coming on to him in any kind of weird way, like that. But she just feels like, because it's important for me to feel like I'm needed, and you need me. I can tell by you what's going on with you. You need somebody to tend after you. So I'm going to look after you. I'm going to make sure that, you're comfortable on the show. I'm going to hang out with you, So he it seems a little strange, but he agrees to it. Now, the actress also chances upon the pianist and his wife, and she recognizes that they are actually really in love. But because she and John Garfield's character were not really in love, they were like friends with benefits, she's envious. And she says, what is it like to be in love? And is it really worth it to be in love? She goes from one guy, like Tommy, to now Langley. She's, schmoozing up with Langley, this really rich, hateful villain kind of guy. And she doesn't love either of them. But she sees in this couple that they're madly in love, and she wants to know, is it worth it? Is it worth really being in love with another human being? What can you get out of it? What is there to get out of it? At any rate, they all gather for dinner. The upper class woman schmoozes with the snobbish, businessman, Langley. The pianist and his wife join the dinner party. They're the only ones, remember, that realize that they're dead, and they've been reluctant to join the rest because they don't want to spill the beans or anything. The shoreman, I think he was a shoreman, or the sailor, Pete, is so happy. Like I mentioned, he's just announcing that he's a father, and that's all he's doing is talk about being reunited with his wife and meet their baby. There's a preacher on the film. Excuse me. There's a preacher on the ship who is a little nervous about going abroad because he wants to make sure that he's able to pick up and continue where he left off over in Europe. He's a man of God, and he doesn't want to have trouble. He wants to be able to continue his work, so he's very concerned that he won't be able to continue his work. The pianist couple, the dinner is just too much, and they're so distressed after the entire dinner of just hearing everyone's hopes and dreams for their life in America. They can't take it anymore. And so the wife, and eventually Henry, follow her. The wife leaves the dining area to just get away from them because it's just too much, and her husband follows her. The rich businessman follows the husband out and offers the husband, the pianist, a great deal of money to be his bodyguard. So he's like, look, I think you're just the guy I'm looking for. I need a bodyguard, I think you're the perfect guy. You're the right size, everything. So he offers him a huge sum of money to be his bodyguard, and he gives him a loaded gun. And he says, I want you to be my bodyguard. But of course, Henry says, he realizes, dude, there's no need for you to have a bodyguard, and I have no need of all the money in the world I could care less about because I'm dead. He doesn't say it, but that's what he's thinking, right? So the rich business guy is just like insisting that you be my bodyguard. I'm going to give you all the money you need. I'm going to give you a gun. You'll be safe. But it's almost on cue. The steward comes out and sees what Langley is doing and offering the pianist, and he kind of gestures to the pianist to accept it. So the pianist accepts the money, puts it in his pocket, and accepts the gun and puts that in his pocket. But he knows that it's futile. He didn't take the money or the gun because he wants them. There's no point in him having either of them, right? But he just accepted it. And but he just knows that there's no point in arguing with the guy. And he just took the guy's money and the guy's gun because eventually the truth will be told. The wife questions why he agreed to help the man. She's like, why did you take his money? You can't help him. Why did you take his money? And he's like, well, the bartender told me not to tell them, and so I'm holding up my end of the bargain. She implores Henry not to socialize with the others anymore since they're different from the rest of them because they were suicides. Now, John Garfield, who has piecing together that something's strange about this ship, remember he's a newspaper man and he's really good at what he does, he overhears Anne and Henry talking when they're mentioning that when the pianist and his wife say they don't know, they're not suicides like we are. John Garfield hears that, so he's like, holy cow, I knew there was something strange about this ship. We're all dead. So the pianist and his wife are like, no, you can't say anything. You can't say anything. Like, this is like not for us to discuss with other people, and we regret that you found out from us. And John Garfield's like, this is great. Because it's like he's got the scoop that nobody else knows, so he's a newspaper guy, right? So he's got a scoop that nobody else on the ship knows except for the pianist and his wife. So when the pianist and his wife beg him not to tell anybody, John Garfield's like, what, are you kidding me? This is a scoop worth dying for. That's what he says. The actress, as I mentioned, makes the decision to hook her hitch her trailer to the evil, wicked war profiteer. So that's going on. She's continuing to hook herself to him. The rich old lady who I mentioned briefly in the beginning, there's another wealthy couple. There's a rich old lady and her husband. The rich old lady sees the war profiteer guy, and she knows that he's a really rich and really powerful man. So she's encouraging her husband to schmooze with him because, after all, he's of our class. And the husband really has no interest in associating with that guy because he recognizes that guy is just a no good person, But the wife just sees him as like, we have to we have to like associate with him because he's really rich and powerful. The husband ignores his wife and just joins the company with the reverend and the sailor, because even though they're from the lower class, he enjoys their company more. So he just decides to ignore his wife and not schmooze with the rich Langley fellow. So instead, the wife decides that she is going to hook up with Langley, not to leave her husband, but just to maybe, I don't know, but to attach herself to him because he's more of her stature than these other people that she doesn't want to associate with. We also, recognize it's made abundantly clear that there's the rich are the snob, with the exception of the husband, the rich husband, the rich wife, and the profiteer are boorish snobs, and they just they don't even want to touch or be anywhere near the common people. John Garfield, his character Tommy, has been reminding the rich snobs that it's a one-class ship. Because now remember, he knows that they're all dead. And he's like, this is a one-class ship, and we're all going to the same place. And the businessman makes a proposition to the actress. Now, he's not married. Langley is not married, but he makes a proposition to the actress to be his mistress. He offers her anything that money can buy. She'll be kept very well. And you see in her face as she hears that, that's not what she was going for. I think she was going to be like the wife, So he doesn't have a wife, and yet he still isn't willing. He wants her. He wants her in a big way, but he isn't willing to make her his wife. But at any rate, he expresses that he has to have her and that he's in love with her. In the meanwhile, Tommy, her boyfriend, overhears all this, interrupts their understanding. And of course, he's amused by it all since he realizes that, they're both dead. And, this hookup doesn't mean a darn thing. And, he sees the irony in his girlfriend ditching him for this guy, because she's making a play for grabbing the brass ring and to be the ultimate gold digger, right? And he calls her a fool. And he says he feels sorry for her, and she runs off. Now, for shits and grins, Tommy, the character played by John Garfield, gathers the travelers to entertain them with a magic show, with a deck of cards. I don't know if actually it wasn't with a deck of cards. He burns the large amount. He goes into Henry's pocket because he saw the transaction, remember, when he overheard. So he knows that Henry has a wad of money in his pocket. So he takes that wad of money out of Henry's pocket, and Henry doesn't care because it doesn't mean anything to him. And he burns the money. It's a large sum of money. So everyone's like, wow, we really can't wait to see how you make all that money come back, because who in their right mind would burn that kind of money? And of course, the bad guy, Langley, insists, you just burnt all that money. I insist that you make it come back. You can't, you have to be out of your mind. Only a sick, twisted mind would burn that kind of money. The pianist is the only one who's not shocked, or and his wife are the only ones that aren't like shocked or disturbed that such a large amount of money that most of them will never see in their lifetimes was just burned, you know, because they know it means nothing. Garfield's final act in this little magic show is to take the gun out of Henry's pocket, point it at Langley, who's now shaking in his boots because Langley's the one who gave it to Henry. So he knows, or is it Henry or Paul? I've been calling him Henry all this time. I think his name was Paul. Forgive me. But the pianist, his name is either Henry or Paul, so I'm not really sure. But at any rate, Langley knows that the gun he gave the pianist is a real gun, and he knows that it's loaded. So when Garfield points it to him and says, "This is my final trick," he's in a panic because he's like, "Holy shit, you're going to kill me." So Garfield does, in fact, pull the trigger. He pulls the trigger. Langley, like, feels I guess he must feel it. He holds his chest, he falls to the ground, and he lays there expecting to die, but he doesn't die. So he gets up and he says, "How did you do that trick? Why didn't I die?" And Garfield very cryptically says, "Because you're already dead inside." Right? So that could be taken more than one way. It could be taken to mean, yeah, you're dead already, or you're really already dead. You know, there's no soul inside of you. That you could take it either way. But at any rate, Langley decides to know, how did you do this? Garfield tells him cryptically, as I mentioned, because you're already dead. Finally, the bartender, or the steward, has to spill the beans because the travelers are now all freaking out, and he confirms to them, yes, you're all deceased. He continues to tell them that the next stop is to meet the is to get their examination and to meet the examiner. This basically, he describes it as their last judgment. They're going to meet the examiner. That's where the ship is going. And when they meet the examiner, it'll be their last judgment. It'll be how they find out what happens to them. Now, the lower class woman who befriended Garfield and wanted to be his, somebody that kind of looked after him and make sure he'd stay out of trouble, she sees, the young woman who was she sees that Maxine, who was Garfield's girlfriend before she hooked up with Langley, she sees the young girl who's wearing this very daring dress, with cut down to there. And she says to the girl, she takes a very motherly tone and sincere, and she says, "Honey, when we come back and we meet the examiner, don't wear that dress, wear something else." And Maxine very brazenly says, "I got a dress that'll make this one look like, a nun's outfit." She doesn't say it like that, but that's what she means. And so she leaves. She goes off the set with us understanding that the next time we see her, she's going to be full regalia, gold digger at its finest. But the last words of the lower class woman to Maxine was, "Honey, change your dress, put something more appropriate on." But of course, the girl is just, at that stage, she's just like, "I got a real Lulu of a dress and I'm wearing it when I come back." Sorry. I'm trying to stay on script because otherwise it's too long. The lower class woman, after she speaks, after she suggests to the girl to wear a better dress, goes to the Reverend and says, "Would you lead us in prayer? I think we need prayer." So, so they lead her in prayer. Now, I think at this stage, the pianist and his wife learned that the steward was also a suicide. I think they learned that. It was just like a little bit of information that was exchanged between the two of them. Once again, the travelers are gathered together to meet the examiner, who, as I mentioned, is the great Sidney Greenstreet. And if you know Sidney Greenstreet, and if you haven't seen this film, you got to watch this film. Okay, you got to watch this film. So the preacher, as soon as he sees the examiner enter the room, or as soon as he sees Sidney Greenstreet, he recognizes him as one of his old buddies from when they were preachers together. And they were very, very, very good friends. So he runs over to Sidney Greenstreet, who I think I don't remember what his name was, but I'll just call him the examiner. He runs over to him and he's like, oh my gosh, how wonderful to see you, He says, I'm a little nervous about where my destination is, because all I've ever wanted to be was be a really good preacher. And I don't know what when I was going over thinking I was going to the United States, I wasn't so sure that I was going to be able to secure a position. And now that I'm dead, I'm really nervous about securing a really good position. And Sidney Greenstreet says, well, I'm the examiner and you're solid. You're good. Your work will continue. You will become an examiner like myself. And your career here is solid, right? So he just got his assignment. The preacher gets his assignment. So he's all happy. The next traveler to learn his fate was Langley, who stepped up without being invited to insist that the examiner do things his way and according to what he thinks is the correct way to do things. And the examiner tells him 3 times, go away. He refuses to go away. He keeps talking. Sidney Greenstreet, if you can imagine him, says, go away. Keeps talking. Finally, Greenstreet says, go away. And he keeps talking about how this should be done and it's not efficiently run. So finally, the steward tells Langley to follow him. So Langley is furious. He's like, why? I didn't get my assignment. Why am I being escorted away? And he continues to argue his case, which only makes things worse because, the examiner, I don't know, I think it was the examiner who tells him, you're dead. Where you're going, money can't buy you anything. And your examination is over. I don't even have to interview you. You're done. So Langley goes off the ship. We don't really know where he goes, but we kind of know that he's going to the worst place of all. Next, the pianist is called without his wife to join the examiner in the examination room. He's told to take a seat. So he goes and he sits and he takes a seat. The wealthy woman walks into the examination room and tells them the specifications she requires for her eternal life. She says, no, listen, because she's so used to giving orders. This is what I want. I expect the best of everything, the best house, the best servants, the best everything. And basically what she requires is a castle. And Greenstreet says, okay, you have a castle. You'll have the best castle we've got. You've got it. You've got a great castle. So she's like very pleased. And she's like, wow, this is very accommodating of her. This is very accommodating of you. And please, at some point, I don't know if she expects him to take her up on it or not, do come by, for a visit. And he says, oh no, that's not part of the deal. I'll never visit you. In fact, you'll never, ever, ever have any guests in your wonderful castle. And she's like, what do you mean? What's the point of living in a magnificent castle with the best of everything if I can't show it off to all my friends and all my people who envy me? And he's like, yeah, well, that's your hell. So she kind of like leaves in a huff. And as she's leaving, she says, well, I'm going to go get my husband. My husband and I'll just make the best of my husband. So he had already been in the room, and he overheard some of the conversation going on between the examiner and her. And the examiner pointed out to her that you haven't really lived a good life. I mean, you cheated on your husband constantly, you know, and you don't really deserve to have him with you. And she's like, well, you can't take my husband away from me. He's a good man. He'll stay with me. But she doesn't realize her husband's standing behind her. And he says, no, I don't want to go with you. And she turns around. She sees that he's there. And I think what his exact words were, I always knew you were cheating on me. I always knew. And she's like, well, why didn't you ever say anything? It was because he loved her so much. He just tolerated it. But she's like, well, come on now, let's go. And he's like, I don't want to go with you. I don't want to go with you anymore. So now she's forced to go live in this castle, not even with her husband. So now her husband's in the room with the examiner. And, he's basically been a saint his whole life. He's put up with her forever. And he wants to know, like, I guess the examiner tells him, like, you're going to hang out with all your buddies, all the buddies you had, and you had the best time with before you married. I don't know what her name was, Genevieve or whatever her name was. All the friends and the best times you ever had in your life, you're going to go back to that, and you're going to have all the best times of your lives together. You're all going to be reunited. So he's happy. So the husband of the awful woman gets a nice forever. Now, Maxine, the actress who the lower class woman takes a motherly interest in also and says, put on a nice dress when you come back out, like a modest dress. We expect her when she comes on the scene to be dressed in red with a dress, with a slit down to here. I mean, she doesn't. She finally joins them in a most modest dress, very demure. Apparently, she's had time to think and reflect, and she tells them that she's really thought about things, and she knows that she's got what's coming to her. And Garfield is like, Maxine, fight this, girl. You got spunk, you got spirit. Don't take this stuff. Don't let them destroy you. You fight for what you want. And she's like, no, I'm accepting my fate. Whatever it is, I'm taking it. So she surprised everybody because, like I mentioned, she came back in with a black dress, her hair in a very modest, not one of these like wild 40s hairdos. I mean, she comes back very demurely. And so she goes off. Now we're to believe, I think there's a few words mentioned, and I think we're to believe that she's redeemable so that she's seen the error of her ways without having it pointed out to her, so that she has a little bit of time to pay, but ultimately she'll get a fresh start in life, and she'll ultimately get her heaven. I think that we're led to believe that. Now Garfield's character hasn't been given his forever yet. So he makes a deal with the examiner with a card trick, and he's like, he says, he makes a bet, like, you pick a card, and whatever trick it was, if I win, I get my choice, and if you win, I'll take whatever I got coming. But of course, he's making a deal with the supernatural. Of course he's never going to win because the truth is going to play out. So he keeps doing tricks with the examiner, and he keeps losing. His fate, as it turns out, was that he'll never be able to trick anyone else again, ever. He's told that he will never be able to escape himself, and he'll always be seen by others for who he is and not what he wants them to think he is. So he's a tough guy, of course, and he's like, well, whatever. But the common Irish woman steps in. And I remember all along she's been tagging around John Garfield, trying to be his friend and to like help him out, right? And she offers to be his housemaid, despite the fact that she herself was entitled to her dream of heaven, which was to have a house with a garden with roses and gardenias and roses. And she's entitled to that. But the examiner says, no, if you, because she says to John Garfield, come with me, I'll take care of you, and we'll enjoy this beautiful home that, with gardenias and, roses. And because she knows that she's entitled to that, because I think the examiner already told her that she was going to have a lovely home. And the examiner says, oh no, if you go with him, you won't be able to have your dream because you'll be with him and he is not entitled to the life that you're getting. So she says, okay, I still want to go wherever he goes. Garfield refuses her gesture because he says he isn't worthy of her kindness and that everything the examiner said about him was true and that he'll take whatever he's got coming. So the housemaid and Garfield exit, and then the housemaid is following after him. And just before she leaves the room, the examiner calls her, says to her, you're a good mother, Mrs. Pryor, which was Garfield's character's last name. He was Tommy Pryor. Well, she stops because throughout the film, her name is Mrs. Midget. She has a different surname. So she stops and she turns around and she's like, she thought she got away with that, right? She thought she got away without anybody realizing that she was Tommy's natural mother. Now she's got a heavy English brogue, and Tommy, as I mentioned, is John Garfield. So he's got probably a New York accent. And we learn as she departs that when she was a young woman, married. Of course, the code would never say she wasn't. She gave her son up because she was so poor, and she thought she was doing a good deed by adopting him to a rich American family where he would have every possible benefit and advantage. But once he was over there, he went in a direction that she hadn't expected. Now, it seems when he went to the UK and became a big shot, somehow she was aware that that was her son. I don't know how she knew that, right? So that when she learned that he, the big shot journalist, was going across to go to America, she wanted to travel too because she finally figured out that that was her son and she wanted to go to America to be with him. But when we found out they were all dead and going someplace, her idea of heaven changed from having a house with roses and gardenias to just being able to be with her son and spend time with her son. And that was her idea of heaven. She could care less about the gardenias and the roses. She just wanted an opportunity to be a good mother to her son. She just wants to get him on the right track. Finally, the sailor, Pete, is bitter. And he's like, I've been a good guy my whole life. I never did anything that was too bad. I don't deserve to die. I'm at the time of my life now. I'm going back to finally to be reunited with my wife and my brand new baby daughter. Why would I die? Why would you kill me? And he's like, I'm being punished for what? I lived a good life. And the examiner explains, well, we all have to die. And, yours might seem like an inconvenient time, but it's just a blip in the cosmos of things. And you, in fact, will be reunited with your wife and child for eternity, and they'll come back eventually. And in the meanwhile, you'll have a really good time here waiting for them. So he accepts that, and he feels okay about that. So then he finally accepts his fate. Now, remember, the pianist was in the room. He was told to sit there while the examiner did all these judgments. And the examiner, in the meanwhile, the pianist, who sat through everyone else's examinations, is left in the room with the examiner. And the examiner says, I'm done. But the pianist insists, well, what about me? I'm here too. Where do I go? And what about my wife? We're still here. The two of us haven't been examined yet. And the examiner says, there's nothing to be done about you guys. You took matters into your own hands. The wife will go the wife can come with me, but you're staying right here. This is your fate. And he's like, I don't understand. And then it's made clear, well, you were a suicide. And then we realized that Stubby, the steward, was also a suicide. And the suicide's fate was to be the steward on one of these ships for all eternity. For all eternity, for the act of taking your life, your own life, your fate was to go back and forth with ships of individuals going from the realm of the living to the realm of the dead. So that's Stubby's fate. So Stubby never really has heaven. He just has that. So the pianist is like, well, take my wife. She's entitled to heaven, so take her. So they call her in, and they explain, because your husband was a suicide and he stays on the ship, but you're entitled to heaven. And she's like, well, no, I don't want to go to heaven. I want to be with him for all eternity, so I'm going to stay on the ship. So the examiner says, so be it. Okay, you're going to be on the ship forever with him. The steward, before the examiner leaves, the steward begs the examiner to give the girl a different fate than being on the ship for all eternity, because she wasn't really a suicide. She was just caught up in his suicide, The examiner leaves the ship with the couple on the ship. But I guess, maybe the steward's wish for her to have a better fate than that was heard by the examiner. But we don't know that yet, but we'll find out. Suddenly, the pianist, everyone's off the ship, the examiner's gone. It's just the wife, the steward, and the pianist. Suddenly, the pianist hears the sound of glass breaking, which his wife does not hear. He wanders away, and the steward implores her, don't let yourself be separated from your husband. Go follow your husband. You need to follow him. And she's like, oh, he's just going to get some fresh air. And steward insists, you must stay with your husband. Her husband continues to hear glass shattering, and he wanders off. And by the time the wife goes looking for him, she can't find him. She can't find her husband. Henry is gone, and the steward explains that and the wife is like, well, where is he? Where did he go? He was just right here, Where did he go? And the steward says, well, he was hearing the sound of breaking glass. He went back. His life was spared. So he went back to life. But her fate, because the examiner already left, is to stay on this ship, even though she's not the one who committed suicide, right? So that's really tragic, right? So Henry's gone, and the steward, like I mentioned, explains that he's gone back to Earth, and that he's somehow been saved and didn't end up dying. But she apparently wasn't saved, and now she's stuck on the ship for all eternity. The last scene is now Henry in their apartment, and he's alive, and he's coming to. And again, just like on the ship when he had a memory that he was a suicide, and he had the memory that he was dead, right? He suddenly remembers everything that happened. And so he remembers, oh my God, I tried to kill myself and I'm back on Earth, So he's looking for his wife and she's dead on the floor. So he's like, oh my God, we made a pact. We were going to be together no matter what. We were sticking together, like we were going to be together in heaven or hell or on that ship. And we can't let this be. So he implores her, like, I guess he pushes her around a little bit to get her to breathe or whatever, to come back to life. And she wakes up and they have their happy ending. So you want to ask, well, where did the sounding glass come from? It was another bomb. It was another air raid bomb. So bombs came in, crashed his building, opened up the building, and of course gave them air. And so they were revived by the fresh oxygen. Okay, so we're at an hour. I have 7 questions. So should I do the questions in another video? or should I just end it here? That's the million-dollar question. If I end it here and do the questions in the next video, people will watch the questions without having seen the video. Well, I'll have to make that clear in the beginning of the video. If you didn't watch the last video, you're not going to make, this isn't going to make sense for you. So I'm going to call it a day right here. That was the film. There's going to be 7 questions, and each one of these questions will have a reading. So I imagine that it'll probably be another 45 minutes to an hour video. So I'm going to do it in 2. I will tell you what the questions are, however. Okay, for question 1, why did Paul the pianist want to kill himself? Was it really just because he could no longer play the piano? Because it doesn't make sense. Because remember, he's going to America. And initially, he wants to get on that ship to go to America because because he can't stay there. And he's willing to leave his wife because she won't have a problem if she stays there. But then when they're dead and they're on the ship, he acts like he was no good because he couldn't play the piano anymore. He was only able to replay the piano once he died. So it's not really clear. So I think there was something more to him than just that he could no longer play the piano. I want to know, what was it that made him want to kill himself? If there were other reasons besides his hands, what were they? Number 2, Paul returns to the living before his wife Anne. Remember Paul? Yeah, his name was Paul. I called him Henry the whole time. I'm so sorry. His name was Paul. Paul returns to the living before Anne. And why is that? To me, it suggests that he deserved a second chance to more than she did. But if you recall, her fate would have been to go to heaven. But once she refused heaven and the examiner left, her fate was to stay on the ship. Right? So since he was brought back to life and she had been, initially, we're to believe that she's going to be stuck on that ship for all eternity. But since the suicide wasn't her idea, what was the plot's purpose in returning Henry to life first, returning him to the land of the living? Because after all, she could have very easily ended up on that ship forever, for all eternity, on a suicide mission, the suicide's fate, when she wasn't really a suicide, right? So since the suicide wasn't Anne's idea, what was the plot's purpose in returning Henry to the living first? She was eventually brought back too, but why did he go back first? She was more deserving than he, I would think. Question 3, for Langley, the war profiteer, who was the primary villain of the plot. What was his eternity going to be? They never specifically spell it out. We understand it's hell, but what is hell for Langley? What was his hell? They never really tell us. Number 4, the other villain, the rich wife who cheated on her husband, at least had a moment's understanding of what a wonderful husband she had. But he was no longer interested in being with her for all eternity. I think understanding the depth of her suffering that she caused her husband, because she did understand, she felt like, oh, he was such a good man, along with never being able to flaunt her wealth, it was a double whammy. I mean, she got hell from both ends. She had to live with the understanding that she hurt a good man. And she understood the depth of that pain. She recognized it. And then the double whammy that she could never flaunt her wealth. She kind of got a double whammy for hell, right? And I wanted to know, was she truly irredeemable? Was she truly irredeemable? Was there nothing about her that could be brought back? Number 5, Mrs. Midget. Was Mrs. Midget really an unwed mother? Remember, this is Tommy's mother. I'm thinking she was too poor to care for her son. And I'm thinking the excuse that she was too poor to take care of her son and that she gave him up for adoption was Hollywood's code for hiding that she was an unwed mother. They'd never say he was born illegitimately in a 1944 film, I don't think, right? Because if she had legitimately been married, why was there no mention of her husband, Tommy's biological father, and for all of them to be reunited and live together as a happy family, right? So I once won to confirmation. I really believe that this was code for Mrs. Midget being an unwed mother and she gave her child up for adoption. And what were the circumstances surrounding Tommy's biological father? Right? He had a biological father, may or may not have been married to the mother. Right? What was the story surrounding Tommy's father? I'd like to know that. I don't know, this is question 6. So I think we're on question 6. Tommy hated Langley. But wasn't Tommy already a Langley in training? Tommy was already on the path of conning and tricking others. He always had to be one up on everyone else. It seems like Tommy hated Langley because Langley was the master of the game that Garfield was playing. Was he jealous? Sometimes what we hate in other people are the dark features that we recognize in ourselves. Mrs. Midget, which is the name she gave herself, so that Tommy wouldn't know she was his mother. Mrs. Midget's role is to help Tommy be a better man. Once she achieves that, because he is redeemable. So Tommy is redeemable. So when he goes to eternity, he's not going to hell. He's going, I guess, to purgatory or wherever it is that you have time to correct yourself, right? So once she achieves in making Tommy or helping Tommy be a better man, will Tommy really want to continue living with his mother, even though he doesn't know she's his mother? She doesn't want anybody to know that. Well, would he want to continue living with Mrs. Midget, with her being the housemaid? I don't know. Maybe once he achieves his greatness and they go live in a house that has a garden of gardenias and roses, maybe he'll keep her as his maid. I don't know. But what I really want to know is there a chance for both Tommy and Maxine to find their ways back to each other for that healthy forever life that they didn't really have? Because if both Maxine and Tommy have a chance, are not going to hell, they're not going to heaven, but they have to spend time in the place in between. If they atone for all their sins, is there a chance for them to hook back up and just have a proper life together? And speaking of Maxine, when the actress Maxine realizes the truth of the situation, she took the opportunity to be alone before regrouping with the others and reflected on what was going on. She came out, as I mentioned, with a very demure, modest dress and hairstyle, no makeup at all. Well, she had makeup on, but Hollywood's idea of no makeup. She was halfway to heaven. She was halfway to her heaven, but needed a little work before deserving it. So we understand that she's going to get to heaven, but she just needs a little bit of work. What was Maxine's deepest regret in life that required redemption? Because she felt like she deserved what was coming to her. We don't know what that was, So what was Maxine's deepest regret in life that she felt she needed redemption? And the last question, which is either 7 or 8. Everyone else in the plot had flaws to work on, except for the Reverend, the cuckolded husband, and Pete the sailor. The 3 of them lived virtually saint-like lives. Why were they called to die when they died? Why weren't they just granted longer lives to just continue living and having a good life? Why was the Reverend called to die? Why was the husband called to die? And why, the wealthy husband called to die? And why was Pete the sailor, who was going to reunite with his wife and child, why were they called to die? It seems like, why? Well, they were just going to heaven, I guess. I guess their time was up and they were just going to go to heaven. But it does seem like, couldn't they have had a little bit of time on earth still? But anyway, I may or may not get to that question because the video will be long enough. Okay, so going to be part 2. I hope you hang in there for part 2. Oh, and this is a fine time, 1 hour and 14 minutes in. If you please give me a like and subscribe. It means a lot. It really does. It helps out a lot. And like, subscribe, share, and click the bell for notifications so that when I do drop a video, you can watch it quickly because that will help me out too. The sooner you watch it after I drop it, the better it is for me. Until the next video, which will be, I'll do the reading with the questions. It'll be the next video, but that I may hold off on dropping it for a couple days. Maybe today's Saturday. It may be Monday when I drop that video. So I'm going to give it a couple days. It won't be later than Monday, but it won't be tomorrow. It'll be Monday. Until next time, friends, peace, stay well, be kind, and do no harm.